Jeff Hammond joining us here on the show tonight. Jeff, welcome to the show. How are you tonight?
I'm doing great. I hope you and all your listeners are doing well, and we're getting lined up for next week, my friend. It's right around the corner. We'll be in Daytona.
We are certainly closing in on Daytona, and we'll talk about that a little bit too tonight. But jump right into things, and for those who don't know you, Jeff, how'd you catch the racing bug?
I get that asked a lot. And unfortunately, but fortunately, I got woke up when I was 12 years old on a Saturday morning by my Uncle Brad. He said, "Boy, get out of bed. We got to get ourselves a race car." And we jumped in his hauler with a trailer behind it, went to Lancaster, South Carolina, which we lived in Charlotte, and went down to Lancaster and picked up a 1956 six-cylinder Ford dirt car. And that was my introduction, and that was the beginning of racing the Carolinas on dirt for several years and building race cars from what wound up being my dad and my shop, and that's where my racing career began.
Let's talk about the early days and getting your start as a tire changer for Walter Ballard. Talk to us about getting into NASCAR in that way of things.
Well, it really kind of turns into being a dirt racer. You went over to one of the local parts houses at that time, which was Tiger Thompson Stones, and a lot of people bought parts from there. You know, Elmo Langley, Walter Ballard, Frank Warren, Jim Van Diver, to name a few, Richard Childress. And, you know, you'd bump into these guys during the week when you were buying parts for your stuff or getting tires. And, you know, I ran into Jim Van Diver and his brother Tommy first, and I helped them a little bit and helped several other drivers, Elmo Langley, and wound up with Walter Ballard. He needed a tire changer and somebody to work on his car, you know, on race day. So I got old enough I could, you know, drive myself. I'd go over to his house after I got done doing high school and help him on the race car. And on weekends we'd, you know, jump in the hauler and up the road we'd go. And kind of like what I got my start doing was just being at the track and working on his car, getting to know guys like Herb Nabb and Jake Elder. Herb, you know, crew chief for Cale Yarborough at that time. Herb was crew chief for Benny Parsons. So I got a chance to know some guys, and fortunately for me, I got an invite from Herb one afternoon after the race to come up and do a job interview.
Excellent. So 1982, you were promoted to the crew chief position for Junior Johnson. Talk to us about Junior and your time at Junior Johnson Motorsports.
Just not to correct you, but to give you the right connotation, it's Junior Johnson and Associates.
And Associates, you are indeed correct about that.
The professor would be completely upset with me if we didn't get that correct, because a lot of us who went through the doors up there will tell folks when they ask, you know, about working for Junior. Up in Ingle Hollow, this is what we used to always say, we were tutored by Professor Johnson in Ingle Hollow, a part of Rhonda, North Carolina. And to be around him was a lesson in racing and a lesson in common sense and a lesson in what it took to live in Wilkes County and be a part of the county, from scalding hogs to working with cows to knowing how to work with coon dogs and just numerous things, plowing a field, you name it. We got an introduction and an education in all these areas. It really was incredible, because here was a man who didn't have a high school education, but he understood physics, he understood aerodynamics, the way a chassis worked from the driver's perspective, because he was a good driver, great driver, 50 wins in his career. But when he became the man, the crew chief, the engineer, the owner, he just took it to another level. And having the privilege of working with him on engines and understanding what you do to carburetors. Now, does that make me an expert? But no, but I was around one. And all the different people who came through that shop, from Smokey Unick to Ray White, Ray Fox. It was an incredible place to work, and that was the best time of my life. I was there for 11 years, and having great drivers come to that shop and working in that shop, from Cale Yarborough to Darrell Waltrip you name it. It was a wonderful time and an unbelievable experience.
You mentioned Cale Yarborough and DW, of course. Many in my age bracket know you and DW from NASCAR on Fox in the early 2000s, but you guys had a pretty darn good working relationship back in the 80s. Talk to us a little bit about DW and your time with Cale as well back in the 80s, and maybe a favorite memory or win that stands out to this day with you.
Well, the one that really stands out the most since we're going to Daytona had to be the '79 Daytona, which everybody has seen. That footage, we battled, with Donnie Allison and Bobby Allison at Daytona that year. We were all three caught up in a crash. All three of us had to, scramble to get back on the lead lap, and there at the end, Donnie and Cale going at it and eventually crashing on the back straightaway. All that captured on live television. From CBS, from flag to flag, and I'll never forget that moment because they're, again, two great racers. Both of them, they were good friends in the long run, and to be able to hang around with Cale and be a part of his championships, it was really, like I say, a bonus for being a part of Junior Johnson and Associates. But that's one that sticks out as far as Cale was involved in. And when it comes to Darrell, I liked, to a certain degree, I guess I loved Cale Yarborough so much that when I found out Darrell was coming over there, I didn't like it. I wanted Dale Earnhardt to drive the number 11 and was advocating that we get Dale instead of Darrell. And Junior real quickly told me, said, no, you need to stay away from Dale because he needs to learn how not tear up so much race cars. Darrell's ready to win championships, and lo and behold, Junior was right. Even though I didn't like him, I worked with him, when he came in there in '81, and by 1982, we kind of like buried the hatchet. And next thing you know, I was crew chief for him.
Hi, Jeff. This is Jim, and thank you so much for joining the show with us tonight. I'm the back in the day guy. I started following NASCAR in 1985, and when we got cable TV, and my dad took me to our local racetrack, Seekonk Speedway, which our host Miles is one of the Saturday night track announcers now. So what I'd like to ask you about is 1985. That to me is one of the great championship battles that kind of gets lost a little bit now over time. The 1992 battle was a great one, and it gets a lot of the talk. But 1985, Bill Elliott just hammered everybody, and by Darlington, he'd won the Winston Million for one of those three races. And you guys were basically at that, if I remember, at the Southern 500, you had a brake problem late in the race. You're about 200 points behind with 8 races to go. Did you feel defeated? What did you guys, within 4 races, you guys had the lead. Was the mindset, well, let's get ready for 1986, or did you just keep chugging? And it was an exciting championship.
Well, we appreciate that. It was a challenge. Yes, Bill Elliott and boys from Dawsonville, they had that T-Bird that was built like a football and run like a rocket. They built a big lead, and they won a lot of races. But when they weren't winning, they were struggling, especially on the short tracks at that time. And, we just kept basically our nose down and to the grindstone and kept digging no matter what. We just would try our best. If we couldn't win, we'd run second. If we couldn't run second, we'd run third. And since it is a points race, we just kept accumulating points and, slowly but surely put pressure on. And I think that once they got past Darlington, I almost believe that, and again, will never say something I want nobody to take the wrong way about Bill Elliott, Dan, and Ernie and Mr. Elliott as far as the Elliott family is concerned. Great racers. But I think that, they felt like that they had it on a deadlock. And I think that basically they stopped worrying about us and kind of relaxed a little bit. Well, we did. We just kept pushing hard, kept trying to score points. Whatever we could do to close the gap. And when we started doing that, here again, they made some mistakes. And we took advantage of those mistakes. And by the time we got to Rockingham, late in the fall, we won Rockingham, and it's like the walls just started crumbling. And with our 3 wins against their 12, it shouldn't have been no contest. But by the time we got to Riverside to run the final race there, It was us just more or less, we need to outrun him, and we won the championship.
It was fantastic because I remember you guys won Rockingham, then Bill Elliott won Atlanta, and you guys had a 20-point lead as you got to Riverside. And Darrell had, I think, had won 5 races at Riverside at that point, and Bill had won his first race 2 years earlier. It was a classic showdown, and Riverside was a great racetrack. It had like a Talladega Super Speedway backstretch. You had a big sweeping Super Speedway corner in turn 9. Then you had the S's, a lot of braking up through the turns and 6 and stuff. It was like Darrell Waltrip said, it really was a great track to decide champions because everything that could destroy a race car was in the driver's hands. The way he braked, the way he accelerated, the way he shifted. And you guys hammered down and hung in there. It's really a life lesson in that. Never give up, because if you watch that season unfold, that's exactly what happened. I mean, everybody had written you guys off after Darlington. I remember Jack Arute up in the booth during that race. Well, he'd like to see the Winston Cup Championship come down to the end of the year, but, well, looks like we're racing for 86, but look what happened. It was a fantastic job.
Well, really appreciate that, but, a lot of that was because of the character of that entire team, from Mike Hill, Doug Richard, everybody who was working on the 11 car that year. It was pretty incredible. Sandy Jones, Eddie Jones, I can go down a long list, Henry Minifield. Everybody, once again, they pulled together, but the one that really was, the silent assassin, I think, in a lot of these years when we were behind, was Junior Johnson. Junior always had the philosophy, don't worry about what's going to happen. Make it happen. Score the points. The points will take care of themselves. If you win the race, the points will fall in place. So that was what we were doing. We were trying to score as many points as we possibly could. I mean, and in that period of time, from 1976 to 1985, we were in contention to win. We wound up winning 6 championships in that period at Junior Johnson and Associates, and you got to understand a little bit better why Junior Johnson was in the first class of the Hall of Fame, because his philosophy, his belief, his leadership, even though it was not your rah-rah type of deal, it was just, guys, we got to outwork them. We got to outwork them. We can't beat ourselves. With all these little things that we talk about today, it's just who we were at that time. We didn't know any better to go out and just run as hard as we could, and at the end of the day, not be frustrated because we ran second or fifth, or we didn't get a win. But okay, where we're going next week? Oh, we're going to Rockingham. That's a good racetrack. Go down there, you win that one, and then you realize this thing's not over with. And we get to Riverside. The one thing that had us concerned was this particular engine, for whatever reason, was blowing a little bit of oil out. So we had an overflow tank to catch the oil that came out. I never will forget, Dick Beatty told us, he said, Hammond, I don't want to see no oil coming out on the back of this rear bumper on this 11 car. As long as I don't see it, I want black flag. If I see oil getting out on the back of this bumper and it start turning black, I'm going to bring you down pit road, and you're going to have to do something about it. Now, they didn't care about how we did it, so we stuffed rags on every crevice we could, filled it up with RTV and duct tape, and we never lost anything out the back of the trunk, and we were able to pull off the championship.
So in 1989, you ended up following DW over to Hendrick Motorsports, and you guys won the Daytona 500. Talk to us about that 89 500. Of course, we know what a famous win that was for DW as well.
Yeah, it's one that he wanted so bad, because he felt like his career would not be complete without a Daytona 500 win. He'd won a lot of other races, the 300 and the IROC races and the 125s. And he'd done it all, but he hadn't won the big one. In 89, we had a really fast race car, but the problem was that was a year that we sat on the outside pole, and our teammate Kenny Schrader sat on the pole, and he had Hoosier tires on while we stayed on Goodyear. But after running the one starting into the, I guess I should say, into the 125s at the time, Bill Elliott had a crash, and he was on Goodyear tires. Goodyear pulled out. So Bill and all the rest of us, we had to switch over from Goodyear to Hoosier. We had to do it during the qualifying race, so we had to come down part of the rules, had to get off of Goodyear, switch over to Hoosier, and we never got a chance to really test on them or get to know them. So when we dropped the green flag come Sunday, we had done some testing practice, but the car wasn't quite right, and we kept working on it. We made it better and better, but then all of a sudden we realized Earnhardt and Schrader had the two fastest cars, and we started trying to figure out how we're going to pull this one off. And we started talking between Stevie and myself and the rest of the team. What are we going to do, guys? And can we stretch the fuel? Can we eliminate a pit stop? And that's what we came up with. And Randy Dorton, who was our engine builder, was also our spotter at the time. God bless him, because he was a great spotter as well as an engine builder. We sure do miss him. But long story short, we figured out a way how to stretch our next to the last stop. And then when our last stop, we stretched it again. And we all put our heads together. I said, Sandy, we're going to get all the fuel out of this thing? He says, yep, he's the guy that built the fuel cell. Mike Powell, Greg Buchanan, gas man, and the overflow guy, can you get this thing packed full of fuel? And yeah, we can. So, guys, don't make any mistakes on this last stop. We don't need to be that fast. We need to make sure we get this thing full. Once he rolled out of there, I said, Darrell, you've got to draft anything you can. Don't you race anybody. Anybody you can get behind, draft. You see a seagull, get it behind him, draft it. We've got to save fuel. Save me some fuel. Save me some fuel. And in the end, we saved enough fuel, pulled the big win off, went through the inspection, and felt sure that we had a big tank and all this other stuff. But honestly, the guys did a great job preparing that number 17. We got all the fuel out of the fuel cell. He did a marvelous job of saving fuel. And in the end, it worked out for all of us to be Daytona 500 champions. And I never will forget, at the end of the race, they had us pull the fuel cell out. NASCAR guys inspected it. A newspaper guy, a reporter, came over and asked the official. He said, "How much fuel was left in that tank in that 17?" He said, "Not enough for me not to drink it." So she was pretty much bone dry.
Jeff, I want to touch the crew chief aspect of things. So, you're a crew chief and you manage, you're the coach, the head coach, like a football team. How do you handle situations like we saw this past weekend at Bowman Gray when, some team cars or just drivers are getting a little aggressive and their emotions are taking them out of positions they need to be in to advance in the racing? How do you rein that back with somebody?
That's a really good question. It depends on the situation and what we're doing, because we didn't really have a lot of races like this. I mean, this style of exhibition racing on a quarter-mile racetrack didn't exist back in my time. Yeah, we raced some quarter miles, and everybody knows what happens on a quarter-mile racetrack. You beat and you bang. Right. But to be able to sometimes get drivers under control and make them realize, this is not going to work, it can be a difficult deal. Back in the day, Cale, Darrell, and drivers like that, Richard Petty, David Pearson, they raced for the purse. There was not a lot of money being paid to them to drive these race cars up front. I mean, it was not existent for a driver to make $1 million guaranteed, at the beginning of a season back then. That was not in the recipe. Okay. Nowadays, these guys are paid, way a lot of money in advance. They got guaranteed salaries, so they're not so dependent on the purse money, and it makes them maybe a little more reckless than what they would normally be if that had something to do with the amount of money they're going to take home this weekend. But to your point, how do you get control of somebody like this right here? You've got to have a great relationship with your driver. You got to be able to know how to talk to him, when to talk to him, and what kind of tone to talk to him. Because every driver, everyone I ever worked with, they have a button that you can push that calms them down, and they also have a button when you push it the wrong way that makes them get more out of control and harder to talk to and get what you need out of. So I've often said one of the key and most important elements of being a crew chief is you got to be a good psychiatrist. You got to know your patient and know how to bring him out of whatever mood he's in or whatever mood you need to put him in to get what you need out of him.
So, Jeff, let's talk a little bit about 2024, your new role with Freedom Racing Enterprises, and looking forward here to the 2025 season. Talk to us a little bit about 2025 and what you got planned with the race team.
Well, what's so exciting right now to be back, with Spencer Boyd and Freedom Racing is the fact that we went down the list, myself, Spencer, and our crew chief, Mike Hammond Jr., and we started talking about what do we need to do to improve ourselves. It's easy to see we didn't have really a lot of great finishes, but this honestly was Spencer, even though that was his, I think, 6th year, coming up on 7. He had not competed in a full truck season, and when I say that, he had not qualified for a lot of races. He'd missed a lot of races, so he'd never run a full season. This year, we qualified for all the races, we raced all the races, and we finished all but one. So we look at the positive, and then we start, comparing what we've lap times, what do we feel like as far as coming off the truck, qualifying. And because of that, we have targeted what we want to do this year. That is qualify better, and at the end of the day, finish better. So qualifying in the top 20, finish inside the top 20. What do we do to make that happen? We've got a new pit crew coming in. We feel like these guys are going to be a little quicker than what we had last year, which will be a plus for us because our guys did a solid job all year long on the 76 truck. But one of the key elements that we have gotten added to our shop is a pull-down rig. Last year we were going down to A&M Racing, which we were paying time to use their pull-down rig and a lot of their people to get our truck prepared for each and every week. Now we have one in our own shop, so we can work on it. Mike can do things to the truck in our own time frame, not feel like you're rushing, try different things because, like I said, we have a block of time when we went to A&M, and now we don't have to worry about time. We can work on something all day and into the night if we're not satisfied. So that's going to help us be better prepared and, faster off the truck. And I think that, we're not wasting time running up down the road, doing everything in-house. I'm excited about that. We got some new personnel that have come on board. So we're going to try to take all this and combine and build 2025 into a much more competitive season than what we had in 2024.
Excellent. So we're up against a break, and this hasn't happened, but I'll probably shoot you a text after. We'd love to have a part 2 to talk more about 2025 and things like that, but also have some of the drivers on. So I'll shoot you a text after the show. But, Jeff, we really appreciate the time here tonight in our In the Turn interview, and we will talk to you soon. We're going to take a quick break, and thanks again.
My pleasure, guys. Anytime we can help out, be glad to.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
All right, so that's part 1 with Jeff Hammond.